Hey, all right. Today we have David Arbit, Director of Research with Minneapolis Area Realtors. Thanks for being here, David. First, can you tell me a bit, just how is the single family housing market doing right now?
Yeah, so we've definitely seen some changes in the marketplace. After 2 or 3 years, so really kind of middle of 2020 through, I don't know, middle of 2022. So for those 2 years, we really had a party. We had a 2 year long party. After you have a 2 year party, usually you experience a little bit of a hangover. And so, things were just so strong for so long that even without the Fed acting and hiking rates as they did, including just yesterday, um, we probably would have seen a cool down in sales or a decline in demand anyway, because a lot of folks who bought in 2020 and 21 maybe would have naturally bought in 22 or 23. And we were in the middle of a COVID frenzy market where everyone wanted single family, an extra bedroom for a home office or a home classroom, or space for entertaining at home or for the kids to run around outside, what have you. Everybody wanted that, and we didn't have enough of it, and we still don't.
Yeah.
So the other kind of big thing, just kind of from like a market analytics standpoint, the concern was we would see more supply and less demand. That would have caused some challenges. That would have caused some heartburn. That's typically what you see leading into a period of softening home prices. You typically see supply grow and demand shrink. What we've had instead is demand has come down, but so has supply. So buyer and seller activity have both kind of come down in tandem with one another. And that's actually, believe it or not, that's kept the balance of the market pretty tight. So people don't believe this, but we are still in a seller's market, right? Categorically, that is a fact, like it or not. We're not in quite as extreme of a seller's market as we had been, right, over the last year or two. But I mean, we're still an undersupplied market. So I know we'll get into some of this, but inventory levels up a little bit, but sales were down 19% last year, and that is extreme. That's a pretty significant change. However, we're comparing a kind of COVID frenzy market against a kind of cooler market from higher rates and everything. If you actually look and compare to 17, 18, and 19, we're really only down about 10% for the year, which is a little bit less extreme. But yeah, so I think the change in demand has been the biggest shift in the market. And so sellers have to be a little bit more patient. They're going to, homes are spending a little bit more time on the market, but prices are still rising. And that's also a surprise to some. But I mean, people are buying, for the most part, bigger houses. New construction homes always cost more. I think you had a question on new builds, so we'll dive into that. So I think moving forward, millennials are in prime home ownership years, and their payments on the median home just went from like 1,800 a month to 2,400 a month. And so that poses challenges, right? And so do people focus more on condos, or do they look at maybe smaller homes? Maybe they'll add on after. So, or other innovative things like, do I get someone else on the loan with me? Do I try to get the seller to, buy down, buy some points and stuff like that? So definitely a shift, but the sky is not falling.
Yeah. So that demand, that decrease in demand is because people bought when it was in that frenzy, and just affordability, things are becoming more out of reach than they were.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely the case. We have an affordability index, our HAI, Housing Affordability Index, and it is at its lowest level in 20 years. So affordability is lower than what I call even bubble level affordability, or kind of 05, 06, 07, when things got pretty unaffordable then. And we are technically below those levels.
You bring that up, is there a concern of things happening the way they did in, 08, 09, from your perspective? Because I've
No,
heard I've heard a few different things. No?
no, no.
Okay.
The answer is no. And I don't answer questions like that all that confidently. But what we can say for sure, and actually, you know what? bear with me here. I want to grab, I got a slide on this. Give me 1 second. I want to pull up
Sure.
my slide because I had so many specifics. And I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so hang on here. Here we go. Let's get this guy going. Where's that going to pop up? Right here. Okay. So yeah, this is a question that we actually get quite regularly. And that's why I've built some talkers around it, kind of some talking points.
Sure.
You know, as one does.
Right.
As you do.
Yeah.
Okay, where are they? Darn it, I have too many slides. Okay, here we go. So is this like 2008 all over again? Here's why we believe we're just in a completely different place. Homeowners have so much more equity cushion. So, you know, the average homeowner that had, you know, 1 or 2 or 5% equity the last go around, many folks have 10, 20, 30, 50, 100% equity this go around just because of what's happened with prices. We've got much more qualified borrowers versus last time where we had what, ninja loans, no income, no job, no problem. We're not treating homes as ATMs. Unemployed people can't buy houses. You know, we were worried about forbearance. Most people are coming off of forbearance and getting current. And this is a key one. Even if prices were to come down 10%, the vast majority of homeowners still wouldn't be underwater. So you won't have these, what do we call them last time? Strategic defaults and walk away, where folks kind of walked away. Remember, homeowners have much lower rates but higher incomes this go around. We don't see that many mass layoffs, although what Microsoft announced, I think Meta announced, a couple others have announced, you know, like 5, 10, 20,000 here and there, but not like the 8 million we saw in 07, 08. We've got a much better regulatory environment. We've got these bank reserve requirements, and we also don't have predatory lending. So those last three really speak to the health of our financial institutions. And when Lehman Brothers and what was it, countrywide or nationwide, you know, when some of these institutions went belly up, not only did it take some liquidity out of the market, but it caused fear. It caused, you know, it really caused fear in the marketplace. Yeah. So we really don't believe that we're anywhere, you know, kind of near where 2008 was. And I've got one other thing that I think you'll get a kick of, and I can send some of this to you, JD.
Sure.
But in fact, maybe I'll just share my slide deck with you. And I got a lot in here, but you can tease out some stuff that you like. So kind of right away, I like to call out, okay, last housing cycle versus now, 8 million job cuts versus what, 100,000? Last go around, 140 million jobs versus 160 million jobs. Last go around, subprime loans were very prevalent. There's virtually none now. New construction, the last cycle peak, we had almost, you know, we had 7.5 million new homes over the previous 5 years. This go around more like 4.5. Inventory, supply levels. We had almost 4 million homes on the market last cycle. We now only have about 1.2. The other thing is foreclosures, the Great Recession and the mortgage and foreclosure crisis and the housing crash. A lot of it was tied to delinquency and foreclosures. If you want to know what's going to happen with foreclosures tomorrow, you got to look at delinquencies today. And so, you know, mortgage delinquency is something like 3% versus 10%. It's, you know, it's a far cry from where it was. And then the homes in foreclosure, it's just nowhere near where it was. So a lot of the precursors that we saw leading into the sort of Great Recession, we just don't have now. And just from our experience of going through that, we do have some protections in place. Not a guarantee, you know, obviously not a guarantee, but it is very difficult to see a 2008 all over again. Very difficult.
Sure. We've learned in a few of those big
a little bit, I think, maybe just enough.
Right. Sure.
Just enough.
So looking at today, these numbers might be about a month old. But new listings of previously owned homes are down 25% compared to a year ago, while new construction listings are up 15%. What would you say this means about the market?
Yeah, good question. I really like the sort of differential there. And what does it say? So let me say this. I think it's important to acknowledge our shortcomings, as my wife reminds me all the time. So we are really good at capturing what's happening in the market. When is it happening? Where is it happening? But we aren't yet fully set up to answer the question, why is it happening? And some of that is because of fair housing law, where we can't attach some of this demographic data to the listings, age, race, whatever, gender, whatever, that kind of stuff. So we don't know kind of the who and the why. But I mean, listen, sales are down 20-30% while interest rates just doubled. Safe to assume there's a nexus there. There's a correlation. So I feel pretty good about that. Okay, so to your question specifically, so over the last 12 months, and I think you saw some December, we don't have January numbers yet, but you might have seen some November or December data.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say this. So new construction listings over the last 12 months are up 20.5%, while existing or previously owned new listings were down 14.5%. So, some of this could reflect builders trying to offload some inventory that's sitting a little bit longer, and they have to pay those holding costs, don't forget. And they also they have to get on their earnings calls, their quarterly earnings calls, and say, sales are down, profits are down. And so they're obviously motivated by kind of that part of the business cycle, if you will. Some are selling, some of these builders of the new homes are selling to investors who will convert to single family rentals. Now, people in this region have strong feelings on that. On the one hand, someone's providing a home, a rental home, which someone probably needs. On the other hand, we already have really low inventory. And so converting some of these home ownership opportunities into rentals can put even more of a strain on the already low supplied, undersupplied environment or undersupplied marketplace we're in. Some builders, again, and anecdotally here, we do not capture data on this, so I'm speaking anecdotally. We've heard some builders were deliberately holding on to product and slowly releasing it on the market to keep prices strong and buoyant, if you will. So now maybe there's this incentive or this drive to, I don't want to say dump on the market, but to offload them a little bit more quickly. Maybe they're thinking that this recession, will be here sooner than later, if, maybe. And, what's the impact there? So are they thinking that they're in a good position to sell them now and get them sold now versus waiting? So yeah, kind of trying to get ahead of a potential recession if and when one does come, and however dramatic it might be.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been writing about the investors buying single family, turning them into rentals. That's a big conversation. A couple bills in the legislature right now too.
Yes.
So real estate seems to have slowed with interest rate hikes, things like that. But a lot of people say, construction is kind of the last thing to get hit by economic downturns. Can you help me understand this broader macroeconomic trend related to this?
Yeah, this is a wonky one, and I struggled a little bit with this question, to be honest. So new construction. So when we say construction, I mean, I want to differentiate. So there's let's just throw out not Shady Oak, that's a road. Cobblestone Ridge.
Yeah.
Some new Lennar subdivision in, call it Rosemount, Farmington, Lakeville, and or Blaine. And so, there's that construction that, has slowed, but there's still, a good number of building permits. Housing First has good data on that. They have their hot sheet that I like. I'm sure you're familiar with that one. So that's a good one. But then they are still building multifamily. So, and maybe that's more in your world, and less in my world, actually, because we're mostly, single family, townhouse and condo, kind of that residential single family. We don't even really do much with duplexes or triplexes. I'd like to in the future. We're not there yet. So when you think about what was holding back new construction, I like to cite 5 L's: lots, labor, lending, lumber, and laws. Tell me that's not fantastic.
That's great. I love that.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Right.
It just rolls. It's a nice little, what is it? A rubric, a mantra, what is it called? Something.
Right. That's
Yeah, and it just, for me, it just helps. And, you remember 2 years ago, lumber went insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's come way back down. So yeah, lending, lumber, or lots, labor, lending, lumber, and laws. And the shortage of lots, right? There was a shortage of dirt. So the cost of dirt goes up. Labor, shortage of labor, cost of labor goes up. Lots of labor. Lending, I think some of the lenders were still feeling a little burned by the '08. So I just think they were a little, what's risk averse. They were just a little bit more hesitant. And that's why I think these builders had to come up with creative financing and bridge loans and, public-private partnerships, whatever, to get some of this stuff done. So, okay, take those 5 L's. Well, guess what? Cost of dirt, I think, is down. I might have to get back to you on that. It makes sense that there's not as much competition for farms to convert them to subdivisions. So that's one. How about labor, right? There's a little bit less demand, maybe labor costs down a little bit. I don't think we've seen that because wage growth has been so strong given inflation, but maybe the supply of labor is a little bit better. If maybe not the costs, but maybe there's a little bit more ample supply. So yeah, lots of labor. Lending. Lumber has kind of fixed itself a little bit, although they still have issues with garage doors, front doors, windows. There's still a shortage of shingles, God knows what else. So, and then lots labor, lending, lumber, and then laws. The regulatory environment has gotten, a little burdensome for some. Someone used the example, I can't remember what city, does city XYZ have to mandate stone facades on the columns of these new homes? Like, do they have to have the stone, mortared on? I mean, that adds $5,000. I mean, it's a little thing, but instead of these things costing, $415, if they were $410 or $405, could a few more people afford them? Probably. But let's find more of those little things. Someone said that the law makes us build Ferraris and Lamborghinis in Minnesota, but people want Hondas and Toyotas. That's what people kind of want and need, or Fords, I guess, not just imports. Yeah, and so yeah, so to think through the broader macro trend. Some of it's just shifted right to multifamily. I mean, rents have been going bonkers as well, and there's very pretty low vacancy rates on the renter side as well. So when I drive around town, I still see some cranes and bulldozers and whatnot, and they are mostly single family projects. But again, I live in the Bloomington, Richfield, Edina area, and I don't see as many single family, I don't see as much single family stuff going on as if you were in Blaine or Lakeville or Woodbury or Corcoran or not Wayzata, wherever. Yeah, other places. Right. So yeah, I might lean on like the builders. That might be a better question for the builders or Housing First, or they used to be BATSI, the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, back in the day. But yeah, so I don't know. I kind of rambled on that one a little bit.
That's fine. Are you, this makes me wonder, are you seeing any geographic trends that really stand out? I know, after civil unrest and just kind of Minneapolis struggling with its reputation, everybody said everybody's leaving the cities. Are you seeing that? What are you seeing happen in that regard?
Yeah, a really good question. So I'll send you a link after we're through to our white paper. We actually did 2 white papers on the flight narrative, that there's people are fleeing Minneapolis, and we absolutely did not confirm that thesis.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
we didn't. I mean, so there was a pullback in activity that was more dramatic than I guess the region as a whole, but then there was a surge in sales, 40%. That was more than the region as a whole. So there was an impact of the murder of George Floyd and everything. There was certainly an impact that was seen and felt, but people want it to lead to all of a sudden everyone's fleeing, and remember, there was a ton of listing activity in every city. Why? Because folks were moving around. So they were selling their entry level and moving up, or they needed more space, or they didn't have to be squished in a condo in the city because they're working remote now. So some of that and remember, Minneapolis is a younger city. The core urban areas of any metro almost always younger, younger professionals, kids, stuff like that. And so some of those folks, millennials with kids, were looking to move up anyway, out of their 1,600 square foot South Minneapolis home into maybe 2,200. I know we'll never go to the suburbs, but I mean, I didn't want to do it, but we just needed some space and I had to.
I think you're describing me right now as I'm considering some of these things. So, I mean, then what expectations do you have for the future of the market? If it's a hard time to gauge, right?
Yes. Yeah, I like to, sometimes I joke, I say, this is a pretty hard climate to forecast in.
Sure, right.
This is a difficult sort of cycle to forecast in. I'll say this. One of your questions I think was really good. My friend Ross, my colleague Ross, likes to say, when in doubt, zoom out. You've heard that.
Mhm.
I love that one. So, you asked kind of zoom out and pre-pandemic, and I know we touched on that, down 20% from last year, but 10% from sort of pre-pandemic times. It's not really apples to apples to look at some of this 2021 stuff or 2020. So I do have that concern. We're still in a seller's market, just not as strong. Inventory is up a little bit, but still below 2019. Still don't really have enough homes for sale. And so here's the kicker. If and when rates do come back down, I think we'll have so much pent up demand from the last 2 or 3 years, but especially over the last 9 months, right, from rates, that we still won't have enough homes to sell, and we'll probably be back in multiple offer situations and bidding wars.
Mhm.
So, we talked about the builders and new construction a little bit. Gosh, I just wish they didn't feel the pressure of quarterly earnings season. I
Mhm.
wish they had just a little bit more of a long-term time frame, and they're now is the time to be building homes because buyers will be back in the market, probably sooner than later, to be honest. And again, we're hearing that anecdotally that things are picking up out there actually quite a bit.
Mhm.
And I think that's because rates did touch 7.3, but are now back to 6.1. So they're, if we see 5.9, I really think that'll be encouraging for folks. Some are actually folks far smarter than I am, which doesn't take a lot, are actually forecasting by this summer, rates could be 4.5 or 4.9. The good news, the inflation, the CPI, the inflation curve is starting to come down. I think it was 9% in June, maybe 6% most recently. So I mean, we are moving the needle on it, but let's not get into the Fed. But I feel strongly, and these views are my own and not my employer's, I feel strongly that the Fed is just yanking on the levers that it has access to and kind of seeing what breaks. And I think you pull the lever, you got to release the lever and see the impact of what you did.
Mhm.
I'm really of the thinking that I'm of the thinking that they should pause for a while. I'm also, especially because the data's come down, I'm also of the thinking that the Fed should have normalized rates years ago. We
Mhm.
should have been on this normalization path, kind of a little bit more normal. And then sure, COVID, and then kind of a little bit more normal. But it was like this, and then COVID, and now this.
Mhm.
And so it feels really extreme. But some other thoughts. So markets always have gyrations. They always have and always will. My uncle's a really good stock investor, and he says in the short term, the market is a voting machine or a voting booth. In the long term, the market is a scale. So in the short term, I'm not happy, I'm not confident, I'm going to vote this way or vote that way. But over a long term, the market really weighs these companies and it says, what's the profit, what's the growth. So I always kind of like that. In the short term, it's a voting booth, but in the long term, it's a scale.
Yeah.
So you'll always see these kind of micro shifts, and that's why they say to plan, to stay in a house for five years. And the logic there was if 2 of those years are tough years for the market, the other 3 are likely to have, appreciation and obviously more equity. So we kind of talked about what's happened the last 2 years, and now we kind of are paying some of that back a little bit. We talked about borrowing some demand from, this year and kind of sucking it into or displacing it into, the previous years. Um, over time, things get back on track. They just do. And housing markets are driven by, good, well-paying jobs, high-quality jobs. It's also driven by household formations. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And also, yes, the rate cycle, as we're seeing right now, the rate cycle and some demographic factors, like there's downsizing baby boomers now, but millennials are really looking to get into that, their first home or maybe a move-up home. So, demographics do play in, but, I think
Mhm.
economy does probably a little bit more, frankly. And then, whether we kind of, here's the trend, JD. Here's the trend. We were on trend and then we did this, and now we're here.
Right.
And it's only kind of a matter of time before we kind of get back on track. I call it the great mean reversion.
It's straight up a drop, climbing slowly back up.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like another way I like to think about it, you yank the pendulum back. Does the pendulum stop in the center? It always overswings. I mean, that's what pendulums do. Sort of like politics in our country, from left to right, to left to right. Just vote for the other guy. And so, I think ultimately it is still driven by, the stuff that we talked about. And I like this phrase, this mean reversion, because that average or that mean always has weight or gravity, and it always kind of pulls things back toward it. So you can only kind of be above or below trend for so long before that gravity takes over and pulls you right back to trend. I mean, when you look at what prices, just look at what sales had done. We don't have the population growth to sustain that kind of sales, that kind of increase in sales permanently moving forward. We just don't have it. So it wasn't sustainable. So you have to have a correction. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're living through.
Yeah, sure. Great.
What else?
Well,
what did I miss?
No, that's it. I don't think I have any other questions. Anything else that you wanted to add that I didn't ask about?
Burning stuff. Let's see. Yeah, what did we leave out? I mean, just other than kind of, and again, I'd love to share these slides with you.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
Other than just looking at, so like days on market are up 30%. Okay, homes are taking 30% longer to sell, but they're still selling faster than in 2020.
Sure.
So it's like the change from 21 does look extreme, but I really do think we have to, and you mentioned this, that we have to look at a little bit more history to have apples to apples, because we're pineapples to pears right now. I'll tell you that. So we're looking for cherries to cherries, or oranges to oranges, or something.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't think. Million plus. That could be a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
I'll just say.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
I'll just say really briefly, 30 seconds or less. In 2020, we saw a 25% increase in sales over $1 million. In 2021, we saw a 50% increase in sales at or above $1 million. In 2022, we saw a 7.5% increase in sales at or above $1 million in that luxury segment, that luxury echelon, that elite bracket. And so, do you know who's not as rate sensitive? Folks with millions of dollars to spend, on a home. Right. So, and you think, and this kind of plays into the investor world a little bit, like what we talked about with new construction. What's a good one? Is it BlackRock, Blackstone? BlackRock, I think. Do you think they care if rates are 2%, 20%, or 200%? They could not care less, because they have $20 trillion in capital to buy anything they want, wherever. They love when interest rates jump like this, because they don't have to compete with folks like you and I. They've got the cash. They win every day. And I'm not to demonize anybody. It's just the way that it is. And that's the system that we have set up. And so he or she or they who has the capital can buy the thing. Yeah. That's where we're at. So, folks who are rate sensitive, and really that's a lot of the folks who are shopping under 300 or under 400K. That's where we really see these declines, because those folks are rate sensitive. And remember, our payments on the typical home just went from $1,800 a month to $2,300 or $2,400. $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. Right. That's not nothing. Anyone I know, that's not nothing. It's one thing to say, honey, you want to go out for dinner and spend $100, but it's another thing to commit yourself to an extra $6,000 for the same house. So, and I think also that's what's kind of rusted the gears shut on the listing spigot. If I'm at 3%, what's my incentive to list my home and go buy for 7%? Or 6 or 6.1? So, maybe then, and you mentioned some of the construction folks, maybe that means if we're staying put, do we add on to our homes, or do we finish the basement or the attic or the lower, whatever. So maybe that'll be a trend moving forward. We don't really monitor or capture that, but that'll be an interest, that would make sense to me. But that stuff's just so fascinating. If you ask me, like, how does the policy stuff, the economy stuff, and then how does it impact like decisions and behavior?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me.
Agreed, definitely. Well,
Clearly.
David, yeah, right. Thank
Here
you
we
so
are.
much. Right, here we are.
Here we are.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and
Of
it was
course.
really great to hear your perspective.
Awesome. Yeah. And let me shoot you a link, and feel free to use, cite, or dump. Totally your call.
Perfect. Sounds
Just
good.
so
All
you've
right.
got it. Awesome. Thanks, JD.
Thanks a lot.